Hi, my name is Luke Sport. I'm a graduate research assistant in the School of Social Work, and I work for Dr. Perry. The co-presenters today will be Justin Petrusak, clinical supervisor for NSO's Tumani Center, and of course Tam Perry, who is assistant professor in the School of Social Work. We want to thank NSO, Neighborhood Service Organization, for supporting us in this project, as well as the School of Social Work and of course the Humanities Center for sponsoring the project. We also want to thank all of our study participants for allowing us to engage with their stories. While interviewing a case manager over at NSO, he made the following remark about one of his clients who would actually end up being one of our primary participants in the research study. He said, "Usually there's been some kind of traumatic event that leads to homelessness, whether it be issues with family. One person told me about how his mom died when he was young, and he just kept bouncing around different family members' houses through his whole life since he was young. He talked about how he never really had a stable environment. We know that as the population of older adults grows, so does the population of older adults who experience homelessness. Homelessness poses a number of health risks to anybody who experiences it, and especially older adults. Research is showing that mortality rates among populations of individuals experiencing homelessness is 3 to 4 times greater than among the general population, and that average age of life expectancy is between 42 and 52 years old. This project represents a unique intersection between Tam's work with older adults and Justin's work as a clinical supervisor in homeless recovery services in Detroit. Last year, I was an intern at NSO with their Road Home program, and Justin was my supervisor, and Tam was my boss. One day when Tam was visiting NSO as a part of another collaboration that the lab was doing with NSO serving older adults in Detroit, Justin approached Tam with this question that they had noticed, that service providers had noticed among the population that they were serving, is that there were men who were experiencing homelessness, older adult men over 45 who were experiencing homelessness as a result of a parent passing away. So we got together and we decided to find out more about what was going on in the lives of these people. So that is our research question. How do men experiencing homelessness after the death of a parent navigate survival in Detroit? We've conducted qualitative interviews. So far, we've conducted 5 interviews with service providers at NSO and 4 interviews with primary participants with an expected total of 10. The data that we'll be engaging with today is from the service providers that we interviewed. Tam and I independently reviewed the interview transcripts, and Justin did not review the transcripts because he's a supervisor at NSO and we want to protect the confidentiality of the employees there who participated in our study. But after reviewing the interview files, Tam, Justin, and I all met together to discuss key themes and to really analyze the data.
So, we're just starting analysis and trying to enjoy spring break this week, all in one. I'm going to speak on themes of identity that we're uncovering, and then Justin's going to speak on themes of survival. I also think it was very interesting to connect. I think this project is certainly an example of Putnam's bridging ties, right? A university with a direct service provider, and I think it also speaks to sort of your work on moral economies. It really was useful to hear, thinking more about that in terms of our own work. So, as we know, documents are artifacts of modernity. We know politics of recognition. We know all this, right? Humanities people love this stuff, right? And also, I'm a linguistic anthropologist by training, so I love thinking about documents and what they mean to people. So, it was interesting for me, who's fairly new to researching persons experiencing homelessness. I'm new to that, but I've studied housing for a number of years. And so what I'm learning in my new work in Detroit is sort of the precariousness links between both housing and health and housing and homelessness, right? So it's sort of a precariousness that a lot of the people we're running into, and part of the story of survival is sort of how you can be on the brink at any moment in this process. So these are some of the records or documents that people are searching for when they're trying to, and the word I thought was fascinating is used, restoring their identity. So again, we bring up issues of legitimacy, etc. And then, so here's an interesting quote. Once you get that stuff restored, it feels so good. Like, you know if it's lost. I remember times losing my idea, and once I found a place, a shelter, somewhere I knew I was going to be permanent for a minute, then I would restore my items and keep them. Yeah, it felt good, because there's no worse feeling than walking around with nothing stating who you are. We've had consumers tell us, I haven't had an ID in 20 years. So this, as we said, we're interviewing practitioners. NSO has a particular employee title, I guess, called Peer Support Specialist. And it's a person who has experienced homelessness who is now an employee. So at times she goes back to her own story of what it was like not to have documents and ID, and then also then can understand in a way what her new clients are going through. There was a woman, in another interview, there was a woman who was 67 who, in order to restore her identity, she had to find her marriage license from the 50s. She had to find her school records from the 1940s. So this is an incredibly hard task, or multiple tasks, to engage in. And the other thing is the cost. Did you know that getting a birth certificate costs $46, et cetera? So again, as we're uncovering this, I think it's really fascinating to think about this. Well, I didn't know that my research team was much more hip than I, and said, well, do you know what "been a minute" means? So if you see this, I knew I was going to be permanent for a minute. So I didn't know that that's a particular vernacular used in Detroit. Do y'all use it? Okay. So according to the Urban Dictionary, which I understand is crowdsourced, been a minute is actually not short, but actually a long time. So when people talk about, and maybe I'm just not hip, I don't know what I'm doing with my time, but so we are talking about, is there such thing as a Detroit minute? And how would that differ from something like a New York minute, which, think about the density of New York, think about all the hustle bustle. Whereas Detroit, you know, yesterday we thought it was spatially sparse, but then today I rewrote my thinking. That's very interesting. And I said, you know what, some parts of Detroit is spatially sparse, but others are not, right? And I think that's actually more of a characterization of what's happening. So I'm starting to think about what's culturally specific about a Detroit minute, so we're exploring that as we continue on. This is an incredible statement, right? I've never seen a homeless person with a file cabinet. So, hold on, I had to get my book. So I was looking up Weber yesterday, and he says on page 115, the idea of a person's duty to maintain possessions entrusted to him, to which he subordinates himself as a dutiful steward, or even as a machine for producing wealth, lies upon his life with chilling seriousness. And as one's possessions become more valuable, the more burdensome becomes the feeling of responsibility. And in previous research, I've really thought about that in terms of, here. In terms of people who had a lot of possessions. And now I've started thinking about that in terms of people with very few. So we're hearing in the interviews that people sometimes bring, so these are, as we said, starting with the practitioner interviews, they bring some items to centers where they're seeking services. But they also talk about people, certainly theft is a big part of this scene. People storing stuff in abandoned buildings and hoping that they can find it when they go back. And then we have the second quote, which is, the case manager says, it might be all they really have left in their life. It might hold some sentimental, emotional value. It might be something that was given to them, maybe. Then you can't keep it, so it might start feeling, so you might start feeling more low, more down, more depressed. So to me, as a social worker, I'm very interested in how we link possessions to mental health issues, right? And then I find out, well, how does it actually work at NSO, a community partner? So Justin says, well, we give everyone a bin. I said, well, let's bring in the bin, right? So this is the bin. Here. Is it on camera? This is the bin that if you do come in with possessions, you're encouraged to put them in. And then the bin is placed, as I understand it, in a room that maybe doesn't have walls. It's a room without walls. And that you need a staff member to accompany you to access your bin. And the rationale for that, my understanding is that there are other people's bins there too. So just to make sure that other people's possessions aren't touched when you're trying to access your own. So again, we're starting to think about sort of what it means to feel like your possessions are protected or not protected. This whole idea of who you are and your identity linked to possessions, and then as you're waiting, which Justin will talk about later, as you're waiting for months to receive housing, how do you also think about your possessions? And then I guess the last part of identity is sort of a more global piece of identity, which is, do you think of yourself as a homeless person? So I had to learn very quickly in partnering in this project that it's more PC to say persons experiencing homelessness, because it's not an enduring characteristic. And I was thinking today about being a graduate student, which took me a really long time. I thought, yeah, there were times when I thought I would never move out of that category. And so, in a more serious note, I would say this idea of identity and other aspects of people's identity that were before and after are also part of our interviews. So, for example, this case manager says, I see a lot of people think it defines who they are. Like, whoever they were before they got here, they don't feel like that person anymore. So maybe they were a mom or a student or an employee, It's like those things no longer apply to them, and they define themselves as being homeless. And I hope that that goes away after they're housed, but I don't know if it does. So another really interesting thing that came up in multiple interviews, and in addition to sort of stigma, and we know that people experiencing homelessness face things like that. I'm good on time, Dr. Smith, don't worry. This idea of, do you think part of your identity is as someone who pays rent? So it was very interesting that in several of the practitioner interviews, they were working with people to think that that could be part of your monthly budget, but also that could be part of your identity, that you would actually set aside part of your money, because several of the people, clients they're working with, have some sources of income. So are you a person that would think of yourself as paying rent? So that, to me, is really fascinating. The other thing that was interesting about this aspect of identity is this idea that getting a house also makes you think of other ways that you can change your identity. So if I get a house, I'm not going to be a person who drinks. If I get a house, I'm not going to be as depressed. If I get a house, I'm going to reunite with my family. And for many people, they are cut off from their families. Maybe they've burned a lot of bridges. So when, in this particular population of death of a parent, maybe they had other relatives, but they burned a lot of other bridges. So that's why they lose their parents' home, can't pay taxes, etc., or to keep it in some way. But they also don't have other social support resources. So we're really exploring this, and this is really, it's been a pleasure to work with NSO on this project. I'm going to let Justin take us home, because I wanted y'all to hear from a practitioner who's working every day with the people in our study. Do you want this? This clicks it.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Jen. So yes, survival. So it begins. Becoming homeless. Or homelessness becomes you. So a system's imposed identity. So, this idea of becoming homeless, and of course, our key theme of identity that is emerging, so people being their experience or becoming their experience, which of course is fluid as experiences change over time. But so just before you do become homeless, so just before you lose your house and tumble down the side of Maslow's pyramid, as one provider put it, major belongings would just be left. Just grab the clothes that you can, and maybe a few keepsake items, and maybe a few important documents, and that's it. Just walk away from everything. You kind of have to start over. On the streets, introduced to new spaces that are scattered with more limited resources to get your now most basic needs met, because that's the level that you're at. So it may be a cultural shock, this new reality. They have to sit next to a guy with bugs on him. As one provider put it, they have to endure the smell, the odors. I don't know if you've ever seen the shower. It's not too inviting. Well, certainly not anywhere near as familiar or as inviting as the bathtub that you've lost. So becoming homeless to being homeless. Who is going to help you adapt quickly enough to your novel environment, so that you don't die and that you do survive being homeless? Well, others whom you now share a homeless identity with, so your in-group can offer strategies. But as Tam mentioned, are the peer support specialists. Folks who have had the survival experience and are now survivors. Information for the whens and wheres to locate services. Novel information, must identify, need to survive. Your peer group can help you identify that to meet needs as basic as bathing, where previously you had a roof and this was not a concern. So there might be times when somebody comes in, this is from a provider interview, and they're looking a certain way, and that'll catch a business owner's attention. You can't come in here, you can't do that here, we know what you're doing, which is being homeless. And other times they're so busy that they don't see you come in. And those are the times I usually try to catch them. So some peer advice being given to someone who's street homeless in regards to how to meet their most basic need of bathing. Someone to talk to, peer advisors. What the AA Big Book describes as the helper that jumps into the hole with you, because they've been in that hole before and they know how to get out. They know the pathway out. So those survivors of the trauma and experience of unshelteredness offer knowledge and skills necessary so that you can become like them, which is housed. And they navigate you through the vast, complex system of gaining access to a roof again. So those documents that Tam discussed as part of identity that are needed for housing. So, a new experience, becoming formerly homeless. So a new identity. And just before you do become formerly homeless, you'll glimpse your new identity as it becomes you. So providers see this transformation. As a case manager put it, they'll be smiling, excited, jumping around, and sometimes dancing, just like, yeah, I'm getting my place.
This is where we wanted to play Moving On Up, because
it is a ceremonial song.
Says they sing it at NSO when someone gets out.
Really?
Right.
We couldn't figure that out technologically.
And there's no systems imposition at Chumani Center, NSO, for accessing shelter as a requisite for housing. So you'll hear this song, this old familiar spiritual, in not only in the shelter halls, but on street corners and under bridges, moving on up to the east side, to that deluxe apartment in the sky. So you'll drop back and leave behind the barriers, so the behaviors that you learned and strategies that you used while you were homeless, and you'll begin to climb back up Maslow's pyramid and learn new behaviors. This is brings us full circle. So it is like those strategies no longer apply to themselves, and they define themselves as being formerly homeless. And I hope that it goes away after their house, but I don't know if it does, which speaks to identity change as tied to behaviors. So depending on the time, perhaps, spent in the space of homelessness, you know, some of those skills that you use might have been essential to your survival as an unsheltered person. Maybe they become ingrained in you because they were so essential. So even though you no longer need them, they are now perhaps maladaptive, and you might need some more support from peers who have survived as well to leave behind some facets of your former homelessness, your former identity. So yes, waiting. So, you know, another key theme that's emerging from our study, so there are of course both adaptive and maladaptive ways to wait, coping mechanisms. Homelessness happened, and more often than not, people are imposed to wait by the system. So rather than waiting on themselves for housing. And so a torturous, roundabout refugee trail sprang up across the landscape of Detroit, where tens of thousands of homeless people by bus or auto or foot travel across the vast space of the transport desert of our city to NSO Tumani Center in the Cass Corridor. Here, the fortunate ones, through peer and case management system navigation, a system that might not be morally economical, the individual might gain enough documents in order to obtain a voucher and exit out of homelessness. But others wait somewhere on the spectrum between surviving and dying. So not that 0 to 1 ratio. And they wait in shelters and unsheltered locations and wait and wait and wait.
Questions for the panelists? So I'll throw a question just so you don't feel left out. This idea that the case manager doesn't know if they'll lose that identity suggests that there's a follow-up aspiration for NSO.
Right. So we're doing service provider interviews as well as person served interviews, so the person's receiving the services. And identity plays a part in both of those systems. So last year, a neighborhood service organization changed the name of our unit from homeless services to homeless recovery services. So we're self-identifying as what we do, which is, help individuals recover from homelessness. The traumatic experience of surviving, though, so these participants come from Tumani Center, which is pre-housing, so they're in survival. The service providers, though, are also in survival. So they don't have that vision of what's beyond. We're surviving day to day to help people meet their most basic needs and to get them housed prior to death. As Luke touched on, the higher mortality rate among sheltered and unsheltered. So service providers are also in survival mode. So there's a way to de-traumatize by having service providers that are in survival actually visit and have the experience with people in their homes that have recovered as a way to retrain the brain, which is a common trauma-informed care practice. So
Excellent.
that's what that quote was touching on.
This is kind of more of a comment than a question, but one thing I was really surprised by, when in our work, we went to emergency food places, soup kitchens, and in terms of people getting together and eating in those spaces, when, and occasionally, something political came out of that in terms of people wanting to take collective action or form something. And it was not food. Even though that was a space that was about food and hunger, it was actually about ID. And that really struck me as interesting. That, and I was wondering what your thoughts on that were. It seems like if we think about these borders of things we need to survive, even though people are at a soup kitchen there to eat, that what they decided to get together and work towards is getting documents. It says a lot, but also that I wonder what you know about the relationship between eating documents and also making emergency food likely to, I don't know, this kind of comment and maybe a general question.
Well, I can't remember if I mentioned it, but getting school records specifically is very hard because a lot of the Detroit public schools that were bulldozed, records were bulldozed with it. So I could see people being at a real loss for how they would, their sources of documentation out there don't exist. So I could see people being upset about that. I would say, I don't really have a clear link, although maybe Justin or Luke do, but I would say what's interesting about sort of the next thing we want to look at is, in a way, getting your documents is also a busy process, right? It helps you feel you're doing something towards, well, first of all, you're following a case manager's direction. Okay, if you bring me all these things, then we can move forward in some way. So you're following directions, you're working with a system of care, but also you're busying your time. And so I do also think, we need to think more about, okay, Luke interviewed one person who, some people's survival skills after they're waiting for months, while they're waiting for months, might be to read a newspaper in the corner in a warm place. And we're even talking about, at the Gerontological Society, about how maybe things that younger persons experiencing homelessness versus older adults, they might have very different ways of surviving in this waiting period. This need to be away from situations that get you in trouble, or so yeah, I think I could see it both ways. I think there's a lot of work, but then there's a lot of occupation. Justin, you have one?
I think it's a wise utilization of resources. So, we're also looking at the time-space geography of the population that's experiencing homelessness as a way to better understand that. What makes a document more important than food? On the landscape, food is more accessible. Maybe not. Food is more accessible because the population that experiences unsheltered chronic homelessness, especially older adults, is relatively centralized. So if you're talking about energy expenditure in meeting your other basic needs, it's weird that documents are basic needs to access what you need to recover. But that energy expenditure and getting those resources takes a lot of energy. There are many different places to go, and sometimes you can't go to those places. So you take in the energy resources of the food to discuss those other resources that are going to cause more energy expenditure to obtain.
All right, well, we have to stop. Unfortunately, it's time for our break. Dr. Edwards, do you need to give us instructions?
Oh, well, I want to thank you all